while most of the restrictions have been lifted here in the state of Michigan, our prisons, not so much. They are still under a lot of regulations. And to kind of break everything down and give us an update, we want to bring in Chris Gautz. He's the spokesperson for the Michigan Department of Corrections. Great to have you back with us, Chris. How are you?
Good, Ryan. Thanks for having me. Always good to be back.
So, this has been such a roller coaster ride, not only for the public, but for our prisoners, but the staff as well, working behind the bars. Because when we're being told to socially distance, not so easy to do inside a prison.
No, that's true. And, we continue to follow CDC guidelines, and those have not changed for carceral settings, which means that while our staff, may be going out to Comerica Park and being around 10,000 people with no masks on, they can go to concerts, they can go to the grocery store with no mask on. When they come to work, they still have to wear them. The prisoners have to wear them as well. So, we're going to continue to follow that guidance. Other states have gone in a different direction. But for the health and safety of not only our prisoners, but our staff and the community around them that they interact with, we're going to continue to follow those guidelines, and staff and prisoners are still going to be wearing masks and practicing social distancing until that guidance changes and we're given a different direction.
It's so. How are the numbers right now? The COVID numbers.
They're actually amazing compared to where we've been. Back in the last fall when the state was going through its second wave, we had, in some cases, sometimes thousands of prisoners at a time who were positive. Right now, we have 12. Last
Wow.
week, there were only, I think, 6 we got down to. So the numbers are incredibly low, and that's really in great part to the fact that 62% of our prisoners are fully vaccinated. And we're continuing every day to promote that. And we're getting more and more prisoners to sign up. And I think people are starting to understand, especially, with the British and the Delta variants, that it's not a matter of if, but when. And so if you're not vaccinated, there's a high likelihood that you're going to get sick. And we don't want to see that. And so we want as many people as possible, our staff included, to become vaccinated.
So, with that, Chris, we have seen recently Henry Ford Health Hospital announce that all of its staff members are going to have to be vaccinated. Is that something that is being considered in the prisons with your staff at least?
Not at this time. There's really a lot of rules. It's not just something that our department can do. Obviously, we're a part of the state, and so there's the Office of State Employer. There's civil service rules. So there's a lot of other externalities and pieces that go into before a department on its own can just mandate certain things. But that Henry Ford piece is actually going to impact us because in Jackson and other places where we interact a lot with Henry Ford Health Systems in Jackson, we have a secure unit for prisoners who need to have significant medical treatment. And so we have an entire wing of a floor where our staff are going. And so any of our officers who are there to provide custody and security for those staff, they're going to have to show that they've been vaccinated. If not, they're not going to be able to have those assignments. So there's a lot of our staff that are now we're going to have to go look at their vaccination status. And so that's becoming an issue that we've been dealing with and just had some meetings on recently. So any of our staff, starting, I believe it's September 10th is when it kicks in, then they'll have to be fully vaccinated as well.
Wow, there are so many facets to this pandemic, and we've heard the word over and over and over again throughout the crisis pivot. Are you ready to breathe a little bit now? Because I feel like, people in your position, but the prisons as well, you've been hit hardest.
We have, and when you said pivot, I was just flashing back to the Friends scene where they're moving the couch up the stairwell.
Right, right.
That's always going to be ingrained in my head. But no, it has been a very difficult time, and our staff have just done an amazing job to try to deal with this. It's been very hard on them. It's been very hard on their families. Worrying about bringing it home, worrying about bringing it in. There's there's a lot of our staff care about providing care and custody for the prisoners. They don't want to see anyone get sick. We certainly don't want anyone to get sick, and so it's been very trying. It caused a lot of our staff to have to go off because they've been sick or they were exposed, which then leads to mandated overtime and stress on those staff that have to stay longer. They're not able to pick up their kids from school like they were planning to. They're not able to take them to the games or whatever they were going to do. So it causes stress on the family. And so that's why we have this really important wellness unit that's there to provide anonymous, mental health care for our staff as well as their families and retirees, because we recognize that's, sometimes as big of a burden as just not being there, and because they have to be at work. And so there's a lot of strain and stress that this has added certainly to our employees over the last 16, 18 months.
So many of these things that the general population, we just don't really think about. And I know law enforcement in general is struggling right now to try to get enough employees. Is that the case for the prison system as well?
Yeah, it's really not. It's that, and it's also just nationwide. We hear from our other 49 states as well as Puerto Rico and some of the other large municipal county jails. Cook County and Illinois and out in LA that run really big systems. Everyone is struggling to find corrections officers, and so right now we have about 600 or so openings for corrections officers around the state. We employ more than 5,000, so it gives you kind of a sense of what we're looking at. And in some cases, there are maybe 3 or 4 vacancies at prisons. Some cases there may be 40 or 50, and so depending on where you're at, that obviously has a big factor on that. So we run quarterly academies. So every 3 months, we're trying to bring in about 200 new officers every 3 months, and so that's what we're budgeted for. Sometimes we hit that goal, sometimes we don't. And so if people are interested, they can certainly go to our website. They can see what the qualifications are, what the training is involved, the starting pay. Obviously, officers have incredibly competitive benefits, and it's a great job. It's a job, one, that you can help provide safety to your community, but also you can help change lives. You can be a role model. You can help run programs. You can do all sorts of things and be a real change maker for individuals who have had a really rough go of it and have traumatic experiences and had difficulties that have sent them to prison. And so it's a really rewarding career and one that we hope people will certainly want to join.
So, are you allowing in-person visitation right now?
We are. We have been for the last a few months or so. Prior to that, we offered video visitation, which is something that we hadn't done in the past, but we have that technology up and running at all. But I think 1 or 2 of our prisons now have full video visitation. And for those prisons who aren't experiencing an outbreak or having large numbers, which again, because we only have 12 in the whole state, I don't think there's really anyone that's on restrictions right now. They are able to have in-person visits. It looks a little different. They have to schedule it. They come in 2-hour blocks. They schedule it online. Then they come for their 2 hours. They have a rapid test that's done in the parking lot beforehand, so we make sure that they're not positive before they come in. Then when they come in, they can have a quick hug or kiss at the start of their visit, and then they sit in between plexiglass dividers in the visiting room, and then they can have another quick hug or kiss at the end, and then they leave. Whereas before, it was in person the whole time. You could hold hands the whole time. You could be there for hours and hours as long as there weren't people waiting. So it is in person. It looks a little different, but by and large, the loved ones and the prisoners are just very grateful and happy to be able to have that connection, be able to see their loved ones, within a few feet of them.
So, how long do you anticipate those new procedures being in place?
For the foreseeable future, again, we're going to follow the guidance of the CDC and what our state health department says. We want to make sure that we're in line and in concert with what they're recommending be done, and also listening to what other states are doing as well. And so, again, some states are further ahead, some states are farther behind. We're just going to continue to follow what the experts say and do what we feel is the safest for everyone involved.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to know because it continues to change. And while for so many of us, life is starting to resume, we're not out of the pandemic just yet. And we do
Right.
have the variants out there that are still a huge concern for the health officials. And Chris, if I can ask you, I saw this headline, and I think so many people, they think it's unbelievable where some of our prisoners are receiving their stimulus checks. How does that, I mean, I know that's the federal government, it's not the state government, but you look at this and you're like, how is that possible? This is money for people because, businesses have been shut down, you haven't been able to work. I'm sorry, but you're sitting behind bars.
Well, that would be a good question for Congress. The first stimulus bill that the Republicans wrote last year and it was signed by President Trump allowed for everyone. They were just trying to get money out the door, understandably, because we were in the midst of a pandemic, and so they signed the bill. and then the IRS said, hold up, we don't want prisoners to get this money. And so the IRS directed us and the other 49 states to not give those checks to prisoners because I think after they signed it, they realized, whoa, that's not going to look good, or we don't like that. But then there was a class action lawsuit that was started out in California. And then when they read the letter of the law, literally there was no ability for the government to withhold the money from prisoners. And so the IRS ultimately decided last October that they had to give the money out. And then there was a subsequent stimulus bill, again signed by the Republicans and signed by President Trump, that did not change that. So it again allowed for prisoners to get the money. And then in this third installment, signed by that was passed by the Democrats in the Congress, and then signed by President Biden, continued that what was done under President Trump, which allowed the prisoners to get this money. And so about $22.6 million total so far has been put in prisoner accounts, although we have been able to claw some of that back to pay child support, court restitution, or restitution and other court fees and things like that. That the prisoners owed and likely would have never been able to afford to pay back without some of this money.
So, but is there also a concern? And, because they're talking about now, what about the, child tax credits? Could some of the prisoners be getting that money, the extra $300 or $400 a month?
It's really going to be individualized. I don't know that there was a difference in the way that was set up compared to the others. And it's really going to depend on whether or not they're still listed on how they file their taxes. Likely, if they have a spouse on the outside, likely the money would go there, but it certainly is possible, even if they didn't get the money themselves, if a spouse on the outside did, if they got the money, they could certainly, nothing would preclude them from sending that money and wiring it to that prisoner as well. So whether they're getting it or not, they still would potentially have access to that. But a lot of the younger prisoners who may have children, that's certainly a possibility. But again, it just depends on how they set up their taxes and what their family structure is like. And certainly, if their family was the victim of their crime, most likely the family on the outside has been able to sever that relationship so that they wouldn't be able to get those funds.
And so, with that, has this caused any problems inside the prison walls? Because while we know prisoners often, they have accounts, family members can put money into those accounts so they can, get, extra food or toiletries, things of that nature. But we do also know there's an underground, a black market per se, within the prison walls. If anything, we know people with cell phones in prison. So is there a concern that some of this extra money floating around could, lead to an increase in violence over, the sale of drugs or weapons or things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of our biggest concerns when we realized that when the IRS told us that we actually had to release the funds and then the prisoners could get it. Our staff, we all felt the same way, that there was a big concern when you have that large of an influx of cash into a system that really doesn't need that level of funding. Because when you think about it, when you're in prison, you're if you're on the outside, your mortgage is paid for because your housing is covered. There's no need to buy clothing. Your food is provided. Your healthcare is provided. There's no insurance, cars, anything like that. So really, at the end of the day, what prisoners spend money on is calling home, writing letters if they're going to use stamps, both either electronically or snail mail, and then if they want to buy extra food items or extra toiletries, things like that. So there's really not a whole lot that they need that money for. And so our concern certainly has been is that if they have thousands of dollars sitting in their account, they may be tempted to try to pay someone on the outside to bring drugs into them or cell phones or whatever it may be. And certainly we battle that every day. Pre-COVID, we certainly did. But when you have all that extra money, there's certainly a much greater temptation and ability, frankly, to do that. And so our intel unit has been working overtime, listening to calls, reading through emails, reading through letters, trying to find instances of this and then root them out and going out and searching cells, searching prisoners, and finding contraband that certainly they shouldn't have. And it could be a danger if left unchecked.
I think one of the interesting things about this is we do know there are some people that haven't really received any COVID-19 money and what it was designed for. So, yes, there's a loophole here, but we have people, serving life sentences. So, because I know some of the argument has been too, well, this money can be used for the prisoners that are going to be released to help set them up so that they can, look for a job and this, that, and the other. If you're sitting there in serving a life sentence, why are we sending you tax dollars?
Well, again, it wouldn't be a question for us, but it would certainly be a question for Congress because we don't have any say. We're just simply the conduit. But I certainly get your point, and I think a lot of our staff would agree with that sentiment. But we also do know, while certainly there is a criminal element that certainly can, and we've seen at use here, we do hear anecdotally though of other times where prisoners will send that money home because maybe they feel bad that because of their poor choices they're not able to provide for their family, and so they may say, I can't use this money. I'll keep some of it, but I'm going to send some of it home so that my child or my grandchild or spouse may be able to do something positive with it on the outside. Now, is that happening in every instance? No, but we certainly know that does happen. But certainly, we're have to be much more concerned about what the potential negative consequences are of having that level of money sloshing around the system.
Hey, I guess we don't think about it, but just because you're behind bars doesn't mean that people don't file their taxes, right?
Right. Yeah. Certainly. And it was certainly we do have some prisoners who come to prison with great financial stability and wealth. They may have had maybe they had a pension from one of the big three, or maybe they had a stock portfolio or something else that was providing them income. So certainly we see that, and certainly they're filing their taxes, and they would have that ability.
See, all these little things that we don't think about. Chris Gautz with us again, spokesperson for the Michigan Department of Corrections. But I know for so many of the prisoners, it probably means the world to them to be able to see their loved ones in person again, even if it is for that short time of 2 hours. So, with that, Chris, anything maybe I didn't ask that you want to share before we say goodbye?
I think you covered it. I would just note as we talked about how we only have 12 positive cases right now, which is a huge thing. And just a few days ago, we passed the 1 millionth test that we've done of our prisoners. So we've done just north of 1 million tests and found 26,000 positive. So I'm not going to be able to do the math for you, but it's a pretty low percentage. But it shows you the amount of testing that we've done, and which is light years above any other state in the country. Even states that have 2 or 3 times the amount of prisoners that we have, we're light years ahead of how many we've had vaccinated. For many states, some states are still debating whether or not to provide vaccines to prisoners. So Michigan's in a really good spot, and I think taxpayers and your viewers should be proud of the work that's being done here to keep not only the prisoners and the staff safe, but also the communities which our staff and the prisoners eventually come back to.
Well, we so appreciate your time, but also extend our gratitude to the entire staff there at the prison system because we know it's been such a trying year and a half for all of you.